The Aboriginal complete from the recording played. Barbra Streisand froze and Jimmy Fallon couldn't authority aback his tears as he had to stop the show. The Tonight appearance starring Jimmy Fallon. Flat 6B at Rockefeller Center. A Wednesday night in backward September. The admirers was electric. 300 bodies arranged into the studio, abounding of them constant Barbra Streisand admirers who had waited decades for this moment. Barbra Streisand didn't do abounding allocution shows anymore. At 82 years old she'd said aggregate there was to say 1,000 times, but Jimmy had assertive her one interview one night to advance her new memoir to allotment some stories to sing maybe one song if she acquainted like it. The account had been activity beautifully. Jimmy and Barbara had an accessible chemistry. He actually adored her and she seemed charmed by his enthusiasm. They'd laughed about her Aboriginal canicule in New York, about her Aboriginal audition, about the time she got absent in Manhattan and concluded up singing in a alms bass aloof to calm her nerves. The admirers was admiring it. The bandage was allure cautiously amid segments. Aggregate was absolute television. And a fresh Jimmy accomplished beneath his lath and pulled out a baby best cassette recorder. Barbara, he said, his accent alive from antic to serious. There's article I appetite to comedy for you. If that's okay, Barbara's smile achromatic slightly. What is it? It's a recording. Addition actual appropriate capital U to apprehend it. Jimmy apprentice play. The complete affection was rough. The hiss and access of an old cassette tape, the affectionate that had been recorded on a bargain accessory decades ago. And a fresh voice, a man's voice, older weathered but clearly warm. Barbara, if your admirers this, at agency Jimmy begin you. At agency you're still here, still singing, still actuality you. Barbara's absolute anatomy went rigid. Her hands, which had been gesturing agilely moments before alone to her lap and absorbed anniversary, added so deeply her duke went white. Her eyes anchored on the cassette amateur like it was apparition fabricated tangible. The articulation continued. It's been 58 years aback that night at the bonsoir. You apparently don't bethink me. I was aloof, the complete guy, the kid active, the bon laugh in the back, but I bethink you. The recording played its Aboriginal words. Barbra Streisand froze actually still and Jimmy Fallon tears alive bottomward. His face had to stop the show. Jimmy's duke trembled as he paused the tape. His eyes were already bushing with tears. He'd listened to this recording 3 times before the show and it destroyed him every time. Jimmy, Barbara whispered, her articulation almost audible. Who is this? His name was Arthur Goldman, Jimmy said, his articulation thick. He was 89 years old. He anesthetized abroad 2 months ago. But before he died he recorded this bulletin and he asked his babe to acquisition a way to get it to you. Barbara's duke confused to her throat. Arthur Goldman, the band's, oh my god. The flat was silent. The admirers didn't accept what was accident yet, but they accepted it was profound. Questlove had bargained his drumsticks. The camera backward bound on Barbara's face. You bethink him? Jimmy asked gently. Barbara's articulation cracked. I have an anticipation about that name in 60 years. He was so affectionate to me. I was nobody. I was terrified, and she couldn't finish. Jimmy's own tears were falling now. He wiped them with the back of his hand, not alike aggravating to adumbrate them. He capital U to apprehend the rest. Can I comedy it? Barbara nodded, clumsy to speak. Jimmy apprentice comedy again. Jimmy chockful mid-gesture, the absolute flat froze. To accept what happened next you charged to accept 1961. Barbra Streisand wasn't consistently Barbra Streisand, figure and legend. In 1961 she was 19 years old, broke, active in a tiny accommodation in Manhattan, demography singing a quaint she could almost afford, and auditioning for any gig that would accept her. The bonsoir was a baby Greenwich Village nightclub. Intimate, dark, the affectionate of abode area careers were fabricated or access in advance of 50 bodies awash about tiny tables. Barbara had auditioned 3 times and been alone 3 times. On her 4th audition the buyer assuredly said, yes, 1 week backward night slot, $50 total, take it or leave it. Barbara took it. The complete architect for her Aboriginal night was Arthur Goldman, 27 years old. Skinny kid with blubbery glasses who admired applesauce and had been active complete at the bonsoir for 2 years. He'd apparent hundreds of singers appear through. Best were forgettable. A few were good, almost none were great. And a fresh Barbra Streisand absolved to simulate that stage. She was terrified. Arthur could see it from his position at the back of the room. Her easily shook. Her articulation trembled on the Aboriginal note. She was cutting a dress that didn't actually fit, adopted from a friend. Her architecture was smudged. She looked like she capital to disappear, but aback she sang aggregate changed. Arthur had never heard articulation like that. It wasn't aloof technique, admitting her abode was already remarkable. It was article deeper. Raw emotion, vulnerability, the complete of addition singing because they had to, because music was the alone accent that fabricated sense. Afterwards her set, Bristles songs that larboard the baby admirers abashed into blackout afore erupting into applause. Barbara rushed off date and anon access into tears in the back hallway. Arthur began her there sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, crying. I was terrible, she sobbed. I forgot lyrics. My articulation cracked. I'm never activity to accomplish it. Arthur sat bottomward beside her. You're wrong, he said quietly. Your activity to be the bigger brilliant this burgle has any time seen. Barbara looked at him like he was crazy. Your aloof actuality nice. I'm a complete engineer, Arthur said. I don't do nice, I do honest. And honestly, I've never heard anyone sing like that ever. Your activity to change everything. Barbra wiped her eyes. You actually anticipate so. I perceive so, and I'm activity to prove it to you. Arthur abolished for a moment and came aback with an absolute tour recorder. His claimed one, the big-ticket one he'd adored for months to buy. Sing one added song aloof for the tape. Aback your claimed and you will be. I'll accord this to you so you can bethink area you started. Barbra beat an emotionally raw saying, Cry me a river, a cappella in that hallway. Aloof her articulation and the abroad sounds of the club's abutting act abating up. Arthur recorded every note. He never got adventitious to accord her that recording. The abutting week, Barbra's performances at the Bonsar became legendary. Industry bodies started assuming up. Managers, producers, within months she was on her way to Broadway. Within a year she was a star. Arthur Goldman backward at the Bonsar for edition decade, a fresh formed as a freelance complete architect for 40 years, a fresh retired to a baby accommodation in Queens. He never proved to acquaintance Barbra, never watched the tape, never mentioned it to anyone except his daughter. She doesn't charge some old complete guy aggravation her. He told his babe Sarah whenever she appropriate extensive out, she's Barbra Streisand. I'm aloof the guy who was advantageous abundant to apprehend her for the apple did. Aback Arthur was diagnosed with terminal blight 6 months ago. Sarah asked him one added time, Dad, let me acquisition her. Let me accord her the tape, she'd appetite to know. This time Arthur agreed, but on one condition, he would almanac a bulletin to go with it. Article Barbra could apprehend afterwards he was gone. Subscribe and leave a animadversion because the best able allotment of this adventure is still ahead. The recording connected arena in flat 6B. Arthur's articulation recorded 2 months afore his afterlife abounding the Tonight Appearance studio. You sang Cry Me a River in that hallway, Barbra. Do you remember? You were crying. You anticipation you'd failed, but I recorded you because I knew that articulation was activity to change the world. Barbra's tears were falling advisedly now. She'd brought both easily to her face, accoutrement her mouth, her absolute anatomy afraid with bashful sobs. I kept that recording for 63 years, Arthur continued. I never awash it, never aggregate it, it was aloof for you, and now, well, I'm not actuality anymore. But my babe Sarah is activity to accomplish abiding you apprehend it. Not the recording of that night. That's castigation to accumulate if you appetite it. But this message. Jimmy accomplished beneath his lath afresh and pulled out an additional cassette, the aboriginal recording. He placed it a claim on the lath amid them. Arthur's articulation grew softer, weaker. I capital you to perceive that on your actual aboriginal night aback you anticipation you'd failed, you afflicted my life. I heard article that night I'd never heard afore and never heard again. Not in 40 years of alive in music. You were abracadabra then, Barbra. Afore the fame, afore the Oscars, afore everything you were already magic. The recording paused, the complete of columnist demography affected breath. Then acknowledge you for administration your articulation with the world. Acknowledge you for actuality adventurous abundant to accumulate singing alike aback you were terrified. And acknowledge you for that night in 1961 aback a 19-year-old kid with adopted dress reminded me why music matters. The recording clicked off. The flat was silent. Not the afflictive blackout of awkwardness but the abstruse blackout of 300 bodies witnessing article sacred. Behind the scenes Fallon fabricated accommodation that defied every producer's expectation. Jimmy didn't move for the bartering break, didn't accomplish a joke, didn't try to lighten the mood. He aloof sat there, tears alive bottomward his face, while Barbra Streisand, the woman who had articulate for presidents, who had abounding stadiums, who had won every accolade imaginable, cried in the bedfellow chair. Finally Barbra accomplished advanced and best up the cassette tape, the aboriginal recording from 1961. She captivated it in both easily like it was fabricated of glass. I bethink him, she whispered, Arthur with the glasses. He told me I'd be a star. She laughed through her tears. I anticipation he was aloof aggravating to accomplish me feel better. He believed it. Jimmy said, Sarah his daughter told me he talked about you his accomplished life. He'd see you on TV or apprehend your music and acquaint anybody. I recorded her aboriginal night. I knew afore anyone. Barbra looked at Jimmy with those acclaimed eyes now red and bloated from crying. Can I apprehend the recording? The one from that night? Jimmy nodded. He had it ready. He'd accepted she'd ask. He played it on the flat complete system. The affection was poor, rough, distant, the complete of a bargain microphone in a hallway, but the articulation was unmistakable. 19-year-old Barbra Streisand, raw and accessible and actually transcendent, singing Cry Me a River a cappella. The flat admirers heard it and understood. This was afore everything, afore fame, afore confidence. This was a abashed jailbait singing because music was the alone affair that fabricated sense. Aback it finished, the admirers rose as one continuing ovation. Not for the able fable sitting in the bedfellow chair but for the afraid babe in that recording. For the journey, for the adventuresomeness it took to accumulate going. But this is the moment no one in the flat and no one watching at home anytime saw coming. Jimmy stood up. He absolved about his desk, article he rarely did during interviews and below beside Barbra's chair. Arthur capital you to accept article else, Jimmy said quietly, affairs a baby envelope from his anorak pocket. Sarah gave this to me. It's a letter he wrote, I haven't apprehended it, it's for you. Barbra took the envelope with afraid hands. She opened it carefully, pulled out a distinct area of cardboard covered in accurate handwriting. She apprehended silently, tears falling assimilate the page. Aback she finished, she bankrupted anxiously and captivated it to join her chest. What did it say? Jimmy asked gently. If you appetite to share, Barbara took a all-a-quiver breath. It says, Dear Barbara, on September 15, 1961, you sang for 50 bodies in a Greenwich Village nightclub. I was one of them. You afflicted my activity that night. You reminded me that art matters, that vulnerability is strength, that the bravest affair anyone can do is allotment their accuracy with the world. Acknowledge you for your truth. Acknowledge you for your voice. Acknowledge you for that night. Love, Arthur Goldman. P.S. You were appropriate to abrasion that dress. It was perfect. The admirers erupted again, this time not aloof applause but oral sobs. Questlove was crying. The cameramen were crying. Jimmy was above board weeping, not alike aggravating to compose himself. Barbara stood up. She absolved to centermost stage, still captivation the letter and the cassette tape. The admirers was on their feet crying, applauding, abode witness. Arthur, she said, her articulation breaking as she looked up against the ceiling. I ambition I could accept thanked you. I ambition I could accept told you that you were the aboriginal being who believed in me. The aboriginal one who saw article aback I couldn't see it myself. She afraid the letter to her heart. I'm befitting this and I'm activity to accept to that recording every time I balloon why I started singing. Jimmy absolved over and stood beside her. He pulled a dejected agenda from his pocket, one of his cue cards from the desk. Arthur's babe Sarah is actuality tonight, Jimmy said, gesturing to the audience. A woman in the third row stood up, tears alive bottomward her face. Sarah, your father's allowance aloof reminded all of us why we do this, why any of us do this. He handed Barbara the cue card. Accumulate this too, so you bethink this night. Allotment and subscribe. Accomplish abiding this adventure is never forgotten. Afterwards the show, Barbara asked for Arthur's address. She beatific Sarah flowers every anniversary for a year. The cassette band sits in anatomy in Barbara's home abutting to her Oscar. And Jimmy Fallon abstruse that sometimes the best important affair a host can do is foot fall aback and let a moment breathe. Let it be human. Let it be real. Arthur Goldman never became famous, but he gave a fable the allowance every artisan needs. Addition who believes in them afore the apple does.